Hello and welcome to Foreign Dispatches, the program that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Teniola Shobowale. On the program this week, U.S. President leads Americans in moment of silence to mourn the more than 500,000 COVID-19 deaths. Plus, Israel launches Green Pass for people with vaccination certificate. The United States on Monday crossed the staggering milestone of 500,000 COVID-19 deaths, just over a year since the coronavirus pandemic claimed its first known victim in California. The president and vice president observed a moment of silence outside the White House during a candlelit ceremony.
Today we mark a truly grim, heartbreaking milestone. 500,071 dead. That's more Americans who have died in 1 year in this pandemic than in World War I, World War II, and the Vietnam War combined.
It was a somber evening as the United States commemorated the grim milestone of 500,000 deaths from COVID-19 about a year after the first known death was reported in the state of California.
As a nation, we can't accept such a cruel fate. While we've been fighting this pandemic for so long, we have to resist becoming numb to the sorrow. We have to resist viewing each life as a statistic or a blur or on the news. We must do so to honor the dead, but equally important, care for the living, those who left behind.
U.S. President Joe Biden called on Americans to remain vigilant, continue wearing masks, and set aside partisan differences and fight the pandemic together.
So today, I ask all Americans to remember. Remember those we lost and those who left behind. But as we all remember, I also ask us to act, to remain vigilant, to stay socially distanced, to mask up, get vaccinated when it's your turn. We must end the politics and misinformation that's divided families, communities, in the country. And it's cost too many lives already. It's not Democrats and Republicans who are dying from the virus. It's our fellow Americans, it's our neighbors, our friends, our mothers, our fathers, our sons, our daughters, husbands, wives. We have to fight this together as one people, as the United States of America.
About 19% of total global coronavirus deaths have occurred in the United States, an outsized figure given that the nation accounts for just 4% of the world's population. The country has recorded more than 28 million cases. Bells tolled at the National Cathedral in Washington to honor the lives lost, ringing 500 times to symbolize the 500,000 deaths. The president also ordered that all flags on federal property and military facilities be lowered to half-mast. After his speech, President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, and their spouses observed a moment of silence to commemorate the grim milestone as Amazing Grace was played.
Now that a significant portion of the UK has been given shots for COVID-19, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has unveiled a plan out of lockdown, but he says caution is necessary to ensure there are no reversals on a one-way road to freedom.
Over a quarter of the UK's 67 million people have received the first dose of COVID-19 vaccine, behind only Israel and the United Arab Emirates in the vaccinations per capita. Although the numbers are encouraging, Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the country must proceed cautiously.
We cannot escape the fact that lifting lockdown will result in more cases, more hospitalizations, and sadly more deaths. And this would happen whenever lockdown is lifted, whether now or in 6 or 9 months, because there will always be some vulnerable people who are not protected by the vaccines. There is therefore no credible route to a zero-COVID Britain or indeed a zero-COVID world. And we cannot persist indefinitely with restrictions that debilitate our economy, our physical and mental well-being, and the life chances of our children. That is why it is so crucial that this roadmap should be cautious, but also irreversible. We're setting out on what I hope and believe is a one-way road to freedom, and this journey is made possible by the pace of the vaccination programme.
Prime Minister Johnson's path for a one-way road to freedom comes after the UK imposed one of the world's strictest lockdowns in January to combat the spread of a highly contagious variant of the coronavirus. Under his plan, schools will reopen the first week of March, while social gathering and workplace limits will remain until further notice. Non-essential shops and outdoor dining won't reopen until April 12th at the earliest. Many Britons now look forward to a return to normalcy.
It's good news. Kids need to be going back to school, businesses need to be open, so yeah, it's good news. It's about time, and let's hope that we don't go back after this.
I think, this slightly more gentler approach going forward means hopefully we can all have a nice summer. So that's what I'm thinking.
I think everything has to be taken cautiously, because we're in a third lockdown and people are getting tired, and I think it's better to keep it a bit longer than we end up another lockdown. So just taking a bit easier. So I just want to be patient and, hopefully we have a nice summer.
As reopening phases roll out with at least 5 weeks in between, lawmakers will vote on specific steps. Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland will also ease restrictions over the next few months. While many have already had their first dose, the Prime Minister's new earlier target aims for a vaccine shot for everyone over 50 by the end of April and all adults by the end of July. With nearly 130,000 fatalities, Britain has suffered the world's 5th highest official COVID-19 death toll, but it's also overseen the fastest vaccine rollout of any big country, making Britain a test case for governments worldwide hoping to return to some sense of normal.
Ghana has become the first country to receive coronavirus vaccines through the COVAX vaccine sharing initiative. The World Health Organization program aims to ensure that vaccines are shared fairly among all nations.
COVAX, the World Health Organization's global vaccine sharing scheme, delivered its first shots on Wednesday, February 24th. A flight carrying 600,000 doses of AstraZeneca vaccine arrived in Ghana's capital, Accra, kick-starting a campaign that Ghanaian health officials say would prioritize frontline health workers and others at high risk of infection. COVAX was launched in June to prevent poorer countries from being pushed to the back of the queue for COVID-19 vaccines. Nevertheless, wealthier nations have since bought up billions of doses and forged ahead with mass immunization campaigns. COVAX wants to close a politically sensitive gap by delivering 1.8 billion free vaccines to less developed economies with the aim of inoculating up to 20% of those countries' populations. On Tuesday, WHO Director Tedros Ghebreyesus urged wealthier nations to share their vaccines, saying that the goal of equitable distribution was in jeopardy.
Currently, some high-income countries are entering contracts with vaccine manufacturers that undermine the deals that COVAX has in place and reduce the number of doses COVAX can buy. Even if we have the funds, we can only deliver vaccines to poorer countries if high-income countries cooperate in respecting the deals COVAX has done and the new deals it's doing. This is not a matter of charity. It's a matter of epidemiology. Unless we end the pandemic everywhere, we will not end it anywhere.
Africa's reported death toll passed 100,000 last week, a fraction of those on other continents, but rising fast as a second wave of infections overwhelms hospitals. COVAX said this month that it had allocated the first tranche of 330 million doses of vaccines for 145 countries, including several in West Africa.
While some countries are just receiving vaccines, the race to vaccinate as many people as possible against COVID-19 is already on the way across the world. This week, Senegal launched its COVID-19 vaccination campaign in the capital, Dakar, with the rollout of China's Sinopharm vaccine.
Government ministers and health workers were at the front of the queue as Senegal began its coronavirus vaccination campaign on Tuesday. The West African country is one of the first in the region to begin inoculating its population, having received 200,000 doses from China's Sinopharm. It aims to immunize 3.5 million of its 16 million people, with 90% of those vaccinations delivered by the end of the year. Some in the capital, Dakar, like student Alex Ntuba, welcomed the launch.
The vaccine is a good thing because we're facing something that is overwhelming us.
Others, however, question why only around 20% of the population is being vaccinated.
If we vaccinate 20% out of 16 million people, the majority of Senegalese will still not be safe. And if those who are not vaccinated contaminate others, those are questions we are asking ourselves. If we have a vaccine, then everyone must be vaccinated.
Senegal is eligible for doses through the World Health Organization's COVAX distribution program and can also get shots from the African Union. Earlier this month, it paid around $3.7 million for the Sinopharm vaccines to kickstart its campaign. As a gesture of solidarity with other African nations, Senegal's health minister said the country's smaller neighbors, Gambia and Guinea-Bissau, would each be given 10,000 of the Sinopharm shots.
Afghanistan also kicked off its first COVID-19 vaccinations on Tuesday, administering doses initially to security force members, health workers and journalists.
First in line are security force members, health workers and journalists. War-torn Afghanistan received 500,000 doses of AstraZeneca vaccine from the Serum Institute of India earlier this month, which is producing the shot for mid- and low-income countries.
Based on the National Vaccine Deployment Plan, we will be trying to cover 60% of our population. It will be done gradually, and we're working with different partners, including USAID, the World Bank, Islamic Development Bank, Asian Development Bank, the European Union, and our neighboring countries like India, China, to ensure that our people are provided with the required number of vaccines.
Health officials have also said that the international COVAX program, aimed at improving access to the COVID-19 vaccine for developing countries, will provide them to cover 20% of the country's population of 38 million. Despite the rollout, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani says people should not get complacent.
The coronavirus risk has not been eliminated yet. Unfortunately, new types of the virus are always emerging. So we need to pay attention to ourselves by wearing a mask, maintaining social distance, and paying attention to all our brothers and sisters' global security.
Taliban insurgents fighting the foreign-backed Afghan government have announced their support for the vaccination campaign. But following a sharp rise in violence in the country, the inoculations will take place amidst relentless violence. Despite the government and Taliban opening peace talks last September, the discussions haven't made any progress so far. Afghanistan has registered over 55,500 COVID-19 infections and more than 2,400 deaths. But experts say cases are significantly underreported due to low testing and limited access to medical facilities in the war-torn country.
When Foreign Dispatches returns in just a moment, we shift our focus to Myanmar as citizens continue to protest against the military takeover. Israel, which has the world's highest vaccination rate per capita, has taken a step towards normalcy, easing restrictions across the country. But additional perks have been made available to those who have been vaccinated and can prove it using a government app known as Green Badge.
Israel has launched a coronavirus Green Pass system which allows people who have been vaccinated to access public facilities that would otherwise be off limits. Israelis who have gotten both Pfizer vaccine shots and those who have recovered from the virus get a Green Pass certificate in the form of a QR code or printout for people without smartphones. The pass allows entry to gyms, swimming pools, hotels, entertainment venues and sporting events. Restaurants and bars will be added to the list in March. Businesses caught breaking the rules will be fined, and the government is threatening to jail Israelis who forge green passes.
We brought facial recognition technology to make sure that the person that gets in is the same person that has the vaccination documents. We are doing it by using facial recognition technology. All you need to do is come here, get identified, and you get a permission to get in fast and secured.
Around half of Israel's 9 million residents have gotten at least one shot since the government's vigorous inoculation campaign kicked off in December. Vaccination enthusiasm has waned in recent weeks as increasing numbers of Israelis with health issues and concerns about long and short-term side effects are avoiding inoculation.
It's insane. It's kind of like they're sanctioning it.
Green Pass privileges and restrictions are raising legal and moral questions.
We can definitely see such lawsuits coming of employees, of people who say, I want to go and see a concert, I'm discriminated. We have to remember that if the disease continues spreading, it also ends up bringing more violation of human rights, not just the right of health, but if people have to be in lockdowns again, their freedom of movement is violated, but also their ability to work.
Within the coming weeks, non-vaccinated Israelis will reportedly be allowed entry to Green Pass venues after presenting negative coronavirus test results. The government has pledged not to have a fourth lockdown, although an official in charge of pandemic response says that with half the country not yet immune, it is still a possibility.
Thousands of people continue to take to the streets in Myanmar despite warnings from the military leaders and increasing violence from the security forces. So far, the military has been unable to quell anti-coup protests and a civil disobedience campaign that has at times forced the country to a standstill.
In defiance of a warning from the military, Monday saw a nationwide protest and general strike where both local shops and international brands closed for the day as workers downed their tools. This protester says he does not care about losing his salary.
We don't want to stay under the control of a military dictatorship. So, we came here to join the protest regardless of the salaries we make. Nothing will happen to me if my salary is cut. But if we stay under the control of a military dictatorship, we will become their slaves.
From the Central Plains in the ancient city of Bagan to the largest city, Yangon, tens of thousands gathered to protest against the coup. Some waved posters supporting civil disobedience movements and raised the three-finger salute of resistance, a symbol borrowed from the Hunger Games films. It's now been over 3 weeks since the armed forces overthrew Aung San Suu Kyi's elected government. Western leaders have stepped up pressure on military leaders, with the US adding 2 more generals to a sanctions list on Monday. Similarly, European Union foreign ministers have agreed to impose sanctions on Myanmar's military.
These latest developments are extremely worrying. People are being killed on the demonstrations. We strongly condemn this military coup and unacceptable violence against peaceful demonstrators. Today we have decided a set of targeted measures with ministers in response to these events. when we took the political agreement to apply sanctions targeting the military responsible for the coup and the economic interest.
Pressure is also growing from the United Nations.
I call on the Myanmar military to stop the repression immediately, release the prisoners, end the violence, respect human rights and the will of the people expressed in recent elections. Coups have no place in our modern world. I welcome the resolution of the Human Rights Council, pledge to implement your request and express my full support to the people of Myanmar in their pursuit of democracy, peace, human rights and the rule of law.
Meanwhile, Myanmar's military chief has threatened to withdraw licenses from the media if they continue using the word coup. General Aung Hyang says the military is following a democratic path and that nothing is more important than human life. Security forces have shown more restraint since the coup compared to previous crackdowns in almost half a century of military rule in the country. Even still, at least 3 protesters have been killed and around 700 people arrested.
Meanwhile, Malaysia has deported over 1,000 people back to Myanmar, defying a court order and appeals from human rights groups to halt the process. Rights organizations say the group includes some ethnic minorities which have suffered persecution in Myanmar.
Malaysia has defied a court order to halt the deportation of Myanmar nationals, sending 1,086 people back to their homeland. The Myanmar citizens were sent back on Tuesday on 3 Navy ships sent by the country's military, which seized power in a February 1st coup. Malaysia vowed not to deport Rohingya Muslims and refugees registered with the UN High Commission for Refugees. But the agency has said at least 6 people registered with it were among the deportees. Refugee groups also say asylum seekers from the minority Chin, Kachin and non-Rohingya Muslim communities are also fleeing conflict and persecution at home, and they are among those being deported. Those deported had been detained for immigration offences. Malaysia does not formally recognize refugees, treating them as undocumented migrants. The Southeast nation is home to more than 154,000 asylum seekers from Myanmar.
And finally on the program, crime fighting has a new look in Pakistan with the introduction of Karachi's rollerblade armed police response unit. Take a look.
A group of police officers in Pakistan's largest city of Karachi carefully balance on rollerblades at a training center and then leap over a set of stairs. It's all part of rigorous training for a new armed rollerblading unit, which has been taking place for over a month with the aim of curbing thefts and harassment on the city's streets. Gliding in a circle with their weapons pointed inwards, the 20-member unit made up of 10 men and 10 women lift and lower their unloaded guns in unison.
We felt we needed to come up with some innovative approach to control street crime in Karachi. We analyzed and saw that there are certain spots where crime incidents, say for example mobile snatching, are more frequent. We also saw that the criminals use motorcycles that help them to run away easily. At times, it is difficult for police teams to chase them from our vehicles.
Officials concede that rollerblading police can't be deployed across many parts of Karachi due to the poor road conditions and uneven footpaths, but they will be sent to public places with a higher incidence of thefts and harassment. Safety concerns were raised when initial footage of the Karachi unit's training showed officers carrying heavier weapons, but the unit will only carry handguns, reducing the risk of bullets ricocheting. There will be some locations such as shopping malls where the officers will not be armed. The rollerblading police, who follow in the footsteps of similar units in Europe and elsewhere, are expected to begin officially next month, but they were recently spotted outside the venue of the Pakistan Super League cricket tournament. And they have also begun practicing patrolling Karachi's bustling beachfront.
And this is where we say goodbye till next week. As always, remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you so much for watching the program. I'm Tenyola Shoboale. Stay safe.